Welcome back to 20 Hours at Suzuka Circuit on Gran Turismo 7. This episode, we're going to be dealing with Sector 2, which is turns 8 and 9. Now, a couple of things I noticed just going through this episode. One is that because of the fact that Sector 1, I spent so much time on it, and it's a fairly technical section. It's a very technical section, in fact. It made Sector 2 feel way more straightforward. I mean, in fact, it is fairly straightforward and not the most technical thing in the world. It's two fairly simple turns, at least what it seems. But the other thing that I noticed in dealing with so much time on Sector 1 is that each successive thing that I try to learn is sort of changing the way my brain thinks when it comes to learning track driving. There's a certain set of neurons, so to speak, that sort of make you approach it with a certain mindset, make you approach it paying attention to certain things, banking certain things in your memory, learning certain things into your muscle memory. And I think this is going to be a principle that's going to carry through each sector and then each track afterwards. It just wires your brain to think in a certain way and to store certain bits of information that are relevant to what you're actually doing. On an unrelated note, I am trying different angles with the camera and different setups, and I think this one looks pretty good. I look famous, let's be honest. It also is a little bit weird because I'm looking at the monitor here and it looks far too like warm and cozy and like chill vibe to be a racing sim video. But we're not here to do what everyone else does. We're only here to do some of the things that everyone else does. I don't know what I'm talking about right now, but the point is, let me know what you think of the camera angles. Let me know what you think of the focal length, of the styling, of the whatever. You get it. Anyway, let's get to Sector 2. On to the pre-brief. So moving on to Sector 2, a lot of the stuff that we've already mentioned in the first episode, really focusing in on the fact that these two turns, turn 8 and turn 9, are very short and very quick changes in direction. This means, I would assume, that using the out-in-out line is going to be extremely vital in this situation for two reasons. One, this is such a quick change in direction for both of these turns. Trying to figure out a way to elongate the turn as much as you can is going to be very important. And number two, along the same lines, by elongating the turn, also increasing the curvature of the turn is going to be extremely important, not only for maintaining speed, but also keeping the car stable. And speaking of which, I can already sense, based on a couple of laps that I've done and looking at the map, the space between turn 8 and turn 9, while it does go straight, is a very short space. And so figuring out where I'm going to brake and how I'm going to get the car stable enough to put in some effective braking to then drop down to third gear to get through turn 9 in a way that's stable and using that out-in-out line is going to be quite tricky. And I think it's going to be really important because anytime you have a long straight after a turn, you're going to want to maximize your exit speed to take advantage of the length of the exit. It's not the longest straightaway on this track, but it's still a long straight. So what you're about to see is that it doesn't take very long to get to gold in this particular section, mostly because it's not very technical. So getting to good enough isn't that hard here. It's getting to optimal that becomes a bit more interesting, as we're going to see. Tried being a bit daring, taking the second turn and third. I think I can still do it, but it might be useless because I have to go really low into third gear. I can definitely say that after spending so much time on Sector 1, which I know I mentioned I spent way more time on it than I expected to, Sector 2 feels way easier. It's much less technical. There's a lot less going on. There's fewer things to focus on. There are areas that I think I can optimize a bit better. I'm still a bit haphazard in where I'm braking, where I'm turning in. I'm not uniform yet in what my steering angle is, where my track out point is, how much brakes I'm applying through there, when I'm applying the throttle again. And then turn 9, I am getting through in third gear. I think third gear, while it's possible, might not be a great idea because it's so low in the torque band, you may as well be in second. Yeah, being more aggressive at turn 8 means I gotta be a little bit more tame in turn 9. And this is where I had a huge eye-opener, realizing that each turn doesn't sit in a vacuum. It's dependent on the turn before and after it. So in this case, as I'm getting better at turn 8 and figuring out how to get through it, my speed coming out of the turn is inherently getting faster and faster, which means I have to adjust how I approach turn 9 and the technique going into it. What ends up happening is you have to be a little bit more conservative going into turn 9 because you're carrying so much speed through turn 8 as you get better and better at it. But the other thing that this also sort of dawned on me is more for the endurance racing side. It's understanding how to use slip angle to your advantage while sort of maximizing the amount of grip that you have in the tire at any given turn, while at the same time maximizing the longevity, because two people can take the same turn at different speeds and aggressiveness, and they'll get the same time through the turn, but one of them is going to be wearing out their tires a lot faster. Not really relevant for right now, but something interesting that popped into my head. The other thing that it does make me realize, even though we all know this, is flinging your car through the corner isn't necessarily the fastest way to do it. Sometimes you have to rein in the speed and get yourself under control through the turn to actually get through the turn faster. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and that couldn't be more relevant in this situation. Because, going back to slip angle, you want to maximize the grip of the tire without pushing the tire beyond its limit, because now you're just compensating for oversteer or understeer or whatever ends up occurring. In this case, understeer, because you're trying to flick the car through and washing the front out. So getting the speed reined in, having a level of self-control, and understanding that the fastest way through a corner is not the highest miles per hour. So the good news is I'm consistently getting gold. The bad news is I'm getting stuck at around 14 seconds, and I'm trying to do the same line over and over again so that I can feel more where I can change things. I am turning in at the 50-meter board, which I don't think you can turn any later than that. Turning earlier than that, you keep clipping the grass. The question is, do I brake before the 50 and then turn in and peel off the brake? Or do I do what's being done in turn 1 and brake while approaching the apex? Here we go. 13.9. Tell me that that last section was not the most satisfying part of this video. I'm watching it back as I'm recording this. Do you see how good I'm hitting those apexes? All right, maybe those who are like professionals at this are probably like yawning at this, but looking back at that video, I can remember how satisfying it was hitting those apexes, feeling like I'm now getting at least closer to the limit of the car. So we saw braking later, trying to brake at the 50-meter board and sort of scrubbing off a ton of speed right off the bat by slamming the brakes and then immediately coming off them to sort of trail brake through that turn, not only gets me through the turn at a faster rate, even at the moments where I'm not actually clipping the apex as perfectly as I should be, but it's also setting me up right up against the outer curbing perfectly for turn 9. That, combined with what we just talked about in terms of reining in your speed because you're getting through the previous turn faster, it just, I could feel it flinging me through that apex and then just putting me right where I need to be to just straight line brake down to second gear to get through turn 9, which is also just whipping me through and putting me right at the exit that I need to be at. These are the things that make driving so satisfying. There is something indescribable. I'm not going to get carried away. This is a video game. One last thing I'll mention. I gotta sneeze. One last thing I want to mention. If you noticed in the footage, the green strip on the inside curbing, of both turn 8 and 9, use these. It is so deceptively satisfying when you get your inside wheels over this green portion, because for one, it blunts the apex a little bit, so it makes it a little bit easier to get through the turn, but also you feel the car through the wheel much more stable. You don't feel it jerking through the force feedback. You can feel the car just smoothly going over like it's meant to do this. It is such a good example of like tactile positive feedback, and it just makes the turn so much smoother, so much more stable, and you feel it. You feel the car being at its limit, but much more under control. That's all been sorted out. We've figured out to some extent how to shave a good amount of time off of these turns, and also not just shave off time, but hit the fastest times you can while keeping the car as stable as possible. There is something to be said about maintaining the time that you're hitting, but getting the car more stable. That's a big deal. Anyway, on to the debriefing. Talking quickly about Sector 2, what we mentioned early on about both of these turns being abrupt and quick changes in direction means that using the out in out line is super important here for the reasons that we mentioned. Making sure that you have the car as stable as possible by making as much of a curvature as you can, and by doing that, increasing your speed as much as you can. Now, the interesting thing about both of these turns is that on the inner portion, right near the apexes, you have a little bit of green. That's the track sort of helping you, because if you can nail it on that green strip, getting the inside wheels over that will aid in the stability of the car and get you the fastest line through it. Now, if you're off from that on either side, you're just going to slow down. You're either going to hit the grass or you're going to hit the rumble strips, and your car's not going to be stable. That's the big thing. The reason why stability matters so much here is because of the fact that between turn 8 and turn 9, you don't have much space to change your speed or to get the car stable. So getting the car stable as best you can through turn 8 to then get yourself to a spot of stability early enough and quickly enough to then apply a little bit more brakes to get down to second gear for turn 9 is just, that's it. That's what makes the turn. And then if you can do that well enough, you can actually carry enough speed into turn 9 without needing to accelerate or accelerate much, and carrying brakes to the apex, which is huge, because anytime I found myself getting off the brakes before the apex, I always felt like there was power and grip left to be had. Like the car goes quiet, as I've been saying, and that seems to tell me that there's more for the car to give through that turn. There you have it. Sector 2 of Suzuka Circuit. Check. On to Sector 3, which, by the way, has a bit of a trap door that I discovered while going through that turn again and again and again. So stick around. Well, don't stick around literally, like don't sit here, because the video is going to be next week, so I don't want you sitting here for a week and not moving. Unless you want to. I mean, I appreciate the loyalty in that case, but, you know, like, live your life. I'll see you.